Join us to get exclusive and rare access to some of the industry's best leaders. Leaders who will share all their secrets to success with you. Leaders who have closed thousands of successful deals between them, generating hundreds of billions of dollars. Leaders giving you the roadmap to fast track your career and reach the highest echelons of the business. So welcome to Series 2 of the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, and best of luck on your growth journey. I'm Pete Nieberg, your host of the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast and the Global Head at Outram. And before this episode starts, I have a small favour to ask of you. Just over 20% of our listeners subscribe to the show, and our goal in Series 2 is to increase that to 40%. So if you've ever liked any of our episodes, our content, please hit subscribe. It helps this channel more than you can know, and the bigger the channel gets, the more high-profile leaders we can collaborate with to help you further on your journey. So thank you for the support. We also appreciate that you're really busy, and based on Series 1 feedback, we've added timestamps to all of our video content, making it much easier for you to access topics to get your help quickly. So enjoy the episode. So I'm pumped to introduce today's guest to you all. Neno Raic, co-founder and managing partner at NLC. Founded in 2021, NLC are the first independent alternative fund finance lenders dedicated to providing general partners and the funds they manage with financing solutions. And in the growing fund financing space, they're rapidly growing too, building their brand, and it's a really exciting time for Neno and the NLC team. So a bit about Neno. He's a PE fund and financing expert, having spent 11 years in the industry. And prior to forming NLC, Neno was head of Investec's fund solutions, fundraising and sales. And in this capacity, Neno built fund solutions, fundraising capabilities, raising first institutional capital in 2018, and over 3 years scaled the business to over 3 billion of third-party capital. So he certainly knows a thing or two about the area. Prior to the head of Fund Solutions, Investec, Neno was part of Investec's New York Fund Solutions team, responsible for origination and structuring of fund financing products. And he also spent time at Lloyds Bank in the FIG team. So the fund financing market, albeit quite unknown to most, is relatively large. And it's estimated, I think, between 750 and 850 billion, and Neno shared with me. So fund financing has been growing in popularity significantly over the last few years. And for the typical investment banker listening, understanding fund finance can be very useful as it interacts with many areas of the typical investment banking process. So I'm psyched to have Neno with us, with his expertise to shine a light a bit more on fund financing and why you should care about it. So welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, Neno, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on. One thing I noticed, there's a lot of fund in that introduction: fund solution, fund finance, fundraising, but that's what we do. So I guess you can't escape it.
I guess we're going to hear that word quite a lot in the next 45 minutes or so. We started strong.
Yeah, exactly.
So I very briefly touched on NLC, but why don't you just start with introducing what you do for your clients and to our listeners?
I think you summed it quite well. So we provide fund financing solutions. Fund finance as a market has been growing drastically, and I've been lucky enough that I joined it at its early stages and saw the development over the last 10 years. But at NLC, what we really focus on is providing financing solution to private capital funds. So these are private equity funds or private debt funds. And the product offering we do ranges from subline or capital call lending, which is essentially lending to these funds with collateral over the fund LPs, all the way to NAV financing, where it's lending to the fund with the collateralized loans being collateralized with the underlying NAV of the fund. And that's something that in the last probably 2 to 3 years have picked up a lot of even mainstream coverage. And then you have everything in between, which is called kind of hybrid. It's a combination of the both. And beyond that, we also explore and can provide financing to GPs themselves. So GPs that manage these funds, they might have financing needs. So it's a whole host of solutions that we will do, but probably the major focus of our firm is subline financing, which is by far the largest part of fund finance market and the one that mostly banks play. We're the first independent alternative lender to step into this space.
Congrats on that. As I said, it's an exciting time. So to be the first in there is quite the milestone. So why don't you share how you ended up in the industry?
Like everything, it's a little bit of by accident, or you just kind of stumble into it. So I grew up in Croatia. I moved to New York to go to school there, university, should I say. And I had a handful of internships. And after graduating, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had this idea that I wanted to be a trader, but every time I would speak to it, anyone in finance, I would say, well, that industry is a little bit on the downslope. You really don't want to do that. You want to do investment banking. And I was like, I'm not sure that that's the right fit for me. So I ended up getting a couple of offers, but the one that I went for is the Lloyd's one in New York because they had a rotational program which suited best. I knew I wanted to be in finance, but didn't know exactly what. And they had all of these things to essentially try for 6 months, which I know in UK is very much a thing. In US, it's less that you get to rotate between the desks. So that's where I started. And one of my rotation was FIG. In there was this business called Fund Finance. It was thriving. Everybody was speaking about it, and they needed people desperately. So as a grad, I got approached and said, "Do you want to do this?" I was like, "Sure." Ended up liking it, ended up staying there, and then moved to Investec and so forth. But that's a little bit of a story. I had no idea what fund finance is coming into the industry or what funds were to be. I knew kind of the mutual funds and stuff like that, but like private equity, private debt funds, it was very much an unknown. So I more stumbled into it than necessarily went for it, but I think also at the time it was a less known field, shall we say.
An accidental fund financer, but you got there. So that's the main thing, right? And it's gone well. It's gone well. We'll
Exactly.
come back to the transition, I guess, from investment banking into fund finance. Before we do that and get into the meat of today, just share something with our listeners that they can't find anywhere about you or something unexpected.
These questions are always tricky, right? I don't think there's anything unexpected, but probably unknown would be I like my football, but I'm quite a big fan of my local Croatian team, which most of the people won't know about, but I watch all the games and it's not the best football in the world, but it's the one that you grow up with. We haven't won a championship for the last 20 years, and it looks like this year might be the one. So I have my hopes up, ready to be disappointed once again.
Fingers crossed. Who's the team for the listeners?
High,
Some might know.
Hajduk Split.
Hajduk Split. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an Arsenal fan, so I know a thing or two about
And,
waiting for
well,
victory.
yeah. Well,
It's been a while.
it's a similar situation that we are in. Then it's very similar.
And just thinking, like one of the things you picked up on your intro about being Croatian and then having studied and worked in the US and now being based in the UK, quite often leaders that I speak to that are successful tell me about multicultural backgrounds and how that's helped them. Do you feel similarly about that?
Yeah, very much so. Especially like Croatia is an interesting country because when I was growing up, we were just essentially fought for the independence from Yugoslavia, and there was
Yep.
Yugoslavia was a communist country, but probably much more developed and in the mindset a bit closer to the Western. So it was always kind of in that in between. But it was certainly help growing up, and there's certain skill sets that you learn in that environment that are extremely useful as you
Mm.
go to New York and London, and then you get kind of acclimatized to that type of thinking. I think I was lucky that I went very early on when I was
Hmm.
18, and as such, there were a number of people that had a profound influence on my way of thinking, which was very different in a country like Croatia. And again, I don't want to make it sound like Croatia is actually quite modern society,
Mm.
but it's certainly different in some ways to what you see. So yes, and I think the diversity of thought as also in NLC is incredibly important. If you're all thinking the same, you don't need many people, then one is enough. But different
Mm.
people, different background, different way of thinking can only lead to a better outcome.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Interesting. It's a people
yeah,
business, investment banking, however you look at
certainly,
it, right? So it's
100%.
I think bringing those experiences helps. Let's talk about most of our listeners today are in the more traditional investment banking space. So why should they care about the fund finance space?
It's interesting, isn't it? Why should they care? Well, I'll give you a personal note on that. I think we've been growing quite a bit and expanding the team, and as we were looking for more associates and we got a lot of investment banking applicants. I think that was probably connected with some of the investment banks downsizing in the last year with the less of
Yeah.
them in activity. So I think just from that perspective, they should care. But if you think about investment banking and sponsor coverage and stuff like that, if fund finance is becoming more and more important, it's another tool that GPs can use. And I think in order to be complete investment banker, you should understand the complete picture. Funds either selling the asset or buying the asset, or whatever it might be. So on that sponsor coverage thing, I think it's very intertwined these days with the actual M&A activity as well. So especially development of NAV financing, how does that play into the driving on selling the assets, what really that is, and then the other side, kind of subscription financing, plays more in acquiring the asset. So these are just different solutions and different layer of the structure that GPs can now employ to optimize the structure and get the best possible outcome for themselves. So I do think it's more important now than it ever has been, and that's probably due to development of the fund finance market and more sophistication and different things being introduced. And I think you certainly see it in the last 12 months. Again, not to go back to this NAV topic, but as M&A IPO market slowed down, more and more of the sponsors went to NAV financing to generate distribution to the LPs, leveraging these portfolio at the fund level. Again, it's a different solution to the same topic. They need to generate distribution. Now they have this tool. So from that perspective, I think it's quite relevant, and it can be. And then the second thing, it's a fast growing, very interesting market. It's not often in finance in general that you would find something as large as fund finance is, but less established as some of the other segments are, such as leverage finance, infrastructure, and so forth. Maybe I'm biased, but I think it's quite exciting.
Yeah. What jumps to mind is you hear a lot, from successful leaders about being creative and needing to be creative to do deals. And if you have a wider knowledge and more tools in the toolbox to do that, and this definitely seems like an area that can help there, as you said, and has helped in with some of the challenges recently. So that makes sense. And I guess if I'm a banker listening today then who does have an interest, what sort of area in investment banking best suits coming out into the more fund finance area? Is there a typical group first that you look for, and then maybe skills as well?
No, not really. It's all about the skill set. It's like anything when you lend or do those type of solutions. It's more around, do you have a skill set that's transferable to other sectors, other industries? All industries are very similar, but they have their own nuances. And I think that's really what the key is in being successful coming into fund finance. It's just a fraction of everything that we're seeing. You have a lot of now alternative funds doing this type of lending. You see an increase there. You have this whole fund of fund market. It's all kind of the same reiteration of providing alternative liquidity to the primary funds, shall we say. So skill set, mindset is probably the two main things. I don't think it matters if you come from specific parts of investment banking. Again, depending on the level as well, right? So for people that are earlier on in their career, it's really kind of having values, the skill set, the willingness to learn is probably key.
That's good to know. Well, you sparked an interest in me when you said mindset. I'm a big believer of
Yeah.
your thoughts control how happy you are in your life, etc., and what you put your mind to. So let's sit there a little bit. Talk to me about the importance of mindset for you and what it means and how to be better in that area as well, maybe.
Yeah, it's huge. For us in particular, we talk about it very, very often. I think our story, setting up NLC and everything, the mindset has been a huge part of it. The only way to be successful is to have the right mindset. You need to focus on positives and always look into the abyss in that way. And it's easy to fall back to being maybe a bit more conservative, and depending what your background is, both professionally and personally, like those things can hold you back. And the true limitation is the only one you put on yourself. It's really how mindset defines how you approach any obstacle, challenge, or problem. And then what mindset you have will probably determine also the outcome of that. Not necessarily that you'll solve every obstacle, but if you have a right mindset, you will probably end up going into the right direction or find other things on that way, where if you put limiting beliefs on yourself saying it's not solvable, the likelihood of you doing anything is very low. And that's something that for me personally, it's very important. And sometimes I also struggle with it. We all kind of doubt ourselves. And no matter how many successes you have, there's still these insecurities that come up. But it's incredibly important in my view, and something at our firm that's very, very much cherished, and people are very aware of it, because people around you also define, that's, I guess, the culture, right? How you think about it.
And do you have tips for building mindset, becoming stronger in that area? Things have helped you. I mean, you talked about the positivity part and having that in, I think you said when you're staring into the abyss or in the middle of the challenge. Any other tips or things you could share?
No, you can always change. Again, going to my background, I think probably mindset of growing up in Croatia is always negative first. Like, oh,
Mm.
it's like, what's the worst thing that could happen? That
Yeah.
will probably happen. And if people ask me when I was starting my career, like, do I ever see starting an alternative manager in this space like that? I wouldn't even dream of it. In my mind, that was not possible for me. My success was working through the corporate ladder, and that's great, but that's all I knew. For me, what helped is speaking to a lot of people, getting different views, being open-minded, and then finding things that interest you and reading about it and try to apply them in your life. And at the end of the day, not being too hard on yourself. I don't think anybody can be perfect as long as you kind of are aware of it. That's all that matters. So those things work for me. How about yourself?
I'm a big fan of habit to help with mindset. So I've got 2 young kids, you got
Yeah,
work, stresses can get in the way, but getting up, doing a good workout before everyone else is up, getting my breathing going, getting myself in the right area, just thinking a little bit about what are my key priorities for the day. And
yeah,
also before bed, winding down, putting the phone away. So those habits for me, I think they're the kind of foundations that allows me to get my
yeah,
mind in the right area. I've
yeah,
luckily always had that mindset of the glass is half full. I think if you don't have that, and a lot
yeah.
of people don't, then you have to work more on that. But that's natural for me. I did do quite a bit of work on PQ. I've forgotten the author of the book's name, but I could share it in the notes. And that was very much about meditation, but in very small amounts.
Right.
And one of the things that I really took out of that book and the learning was to see every big negative, every big challenge, what's the one positive in it? And just
Yep.
taking that away. Because it's really easy to get
Yeah.
caught in the moment, but always coming back to what was the positive out of that. And
Yep.
usually it might take a bit of time to dissect it and see it. But when you do that, I find it's really key for future success. So I think there are some of the things that jump to my mind in that area.
Incredible. Yeah. 100% agree with that. I think every challenge or negative, whatever you want, it's just, there's a lot of positivity to come out of that. It's really how you approach it.
Yeah. And that habit and routine that's so difficult early in your career, I wish I'd picked it
Yes.
up sooner, right? I think I hear that a lot from one of those pieces of experience that you give yourself if you were younger again. Start earlier with the routine and get yourself in a good space. We talked about mindset, but you also mentioned skill set. So to be a great fund financer, raiser, what are the key skills?
Our business, since we set up NLC, it's been different, right? We raise capital from institutional investors and we deploy that capital with the GPs. But one of the things that if I start with the fundraising, I think perseverance is absolutely key. Fundraising is tough. We are currently in a tough fundraising environment, and you need to come with the willingness to persevere. And then the second one is the excitement. And I genuinely do think they come in the kind of disorder. I think you have to be excited about your product, and you truly have to believe in what you're selling, because at the end of the day, what you're doing. And if you think that's going to create value for your investors, then you're already halfway there if you have two of those things. And then the third one is knowledge. And what I mean by knowledge is not only the knowledge of your product, but it's also knowledge of the person you're speaking to and what they're looking for. And can you solve their specific needs? Because you might be enthusiastic as hell and have a great product that you really believe in, but if they don't need it or their mindset, you're just not going to succeed in it. So it's about optimizing your time and finding value. So for me, kind of starting from fundraising side at Investec, I mean, we started initially as syndication, moved into it. Like those are the three things that I found throughout my career to be the most important things. But then I think they apply through everything. We can go about specific skill sets for certain people coming into the industry, but essentially determine what you want. You're going to get there and enthusiastic about learning and genuinely keen about the job and look at the job as an opportunity to grow and find out things, and you come with that. And then you build on your knowledge or you come with existing knowledge. I think no matter what, you're going to succeed. I appreciate some of the people listening to this podcast maybe earlier in their career. The only key thing that I would think is that if you can solve people's problems, or when you see things that maybe some of your managers don't want to do, if you can do that, take it away and solve it for them, that goes a massive way. Independent if whatever it might be, I think that sets you apart right away. If you on top of that are self-started, motivated, that you don't need to be told how, I think if you have that, your career will propel immensely very quickly. But I think if you can do those 3 to 5 things that we said with the right approach, I think you have nothing to worry about.
And just sitting on that kind of knowledge, I agree with you 100%, by the way. And I think you need to be passionate and excited about what you're doing. And I got great advice when I started quite a while ago at Outram, and when I was looking for a role, about pick the product that you can get
Yeah,
excited about and you can get out of bed about. And I think that's really overlooked. So taking the time to get that is key to success. But let's sit a bit on the knowledge of the person.
Mm.
You said that, and adding value for the person. Do you have certain things that you do that really help you to ensure you've built the knowledge of the person and you understand their needs?
Yeah, no, throughout. I think not only for fundraising, I think as we approach the GPs providing them with the solution, I think if you want to be successful in investment banking, but any part of finance, I think if you just come in with your product and trying to push your product, you will succeed sometimes, but more often than not, you'll fail. Just because you have to take this approach of what does this person really care about? What is he or she looking for? And how can I solve their needs? If you have that mindset first, then I think no matter what you do, you're probably going to be successful. How to do that? Number of ways. The more prepared you are, the better the outcome is going to be. If you can get information online, if you try to understand really what the focus of and what you're doing and how that can solve what your prospect is looking to do, I think that's great. And then it's also listening. I find that sometimes that people struggle the most with that is being actively listening and really hearing not what you want to hear, but what the person is going to say. And then one thing that I learned throughout my career, which for me was probably the hardest, is asking questions that you're afraid to hear the answer to. Because often we find, especially in my line of work, that people don't want to ask the questions where they might get the answer that they don't want to get. But by not doing so, you're just not helping yourself or that person. You're lying to yourself to begin with, and then you just need to address that fear. I certainly had it many times in fundraising. So the quicker you can get to that, the better it is, at least in my experience.
I like that take. I've not heard of that before, presented in that way, asking questions, yes, but asking the tough one, the one you don't want to hear the answer to, and how that can help you. So I love that. And again, agree. You've got to listen. You've really got to be willing to do the research right and understand
Yeah.
what's going on before you get in the room with the right people. And with some of the tools we have available today that we didn't have available a few years ago, that research is quicker and easier to do. So there's no excuse not to do it, right? And to put yourself in the best position. Excuse not to do it, right? And to put yourself in the best position.
And just to add on that, what I specifically mean about that is like there's even simple questions as you do fundraising, you kind of go to someone and you say after you did your initial pitch, like, is this product relevant to you? That's a scary question because they could say no. And then you failed your pitch. But if you just go and you do your pitch, you can come out of that meeting feeling relatively good about yourself, but you have no idea, is that person interested or not? So you're going to then spend more time on the back end, spending your time annoying them potentially and stuff, and just by asking that question. So that's what I mean. I don't mean ask tough questions to people that don't want to answer. It's more things that might you be afraid of, and I think they will help a lot in getting where you want to get to.
I guess it might even show you some gaps where you could
Exactly.
shore up your product or your offering that could lead to more feedback from colleagues as well, right? We hear that as well.
Same thing.
You know, if you just want to surf along, I'm always happy when I'm hearing a lot of questions from the team.
Yeah.
Because you know that they're comfortable and they're asking them because they want to grow and develop. It's the ones where you hear nothing. Maybe they're working really hard in the background on things that other people could give them advice and they could do it a lot quicker. So
Certainly.
I think that questioning mentality is great. So to go back on the transition, skill set, you talked about mindset and you're focusing on the positives, willingness to learn. We talked about the skill set, perseverance, excitement in the product, talked about the knowledge of the person and the value that you can bring. Any advice on if I'm looking to make that transition into fundraising and fund finance, how I could prepare myself better for that transition?
My career has been full of transitions. Like I went from Lloyd's to small bank investor that I candidly never heard of in New York, but I knew they were doing some fund financing stuff. So it was interesting because it was innovating. Kind of took a leap having the interviews there and ended up liking it a lot. And then from being on the origination side and structuring the deals, I went down to syndication, sales side. And in all of those things, there was one fundamental thing that drove those decisions. It was, can I progress in this? Does this suit what I really wanted to do? And do I think I can bring success, not my own success, but success to the group success? And that's key. And then when we were setting up NLC and leaving Investec, that was the same question. I would love to come here and say, oh, when we were doing this, I saw it and we took this massive risk. It really didn't feel that way. We came in, we fundamentally believed in what can be done. The bank had a slightly different view about how they wanted to approach the business, which was 100% understandable from a bank's perspective. And we just sat down and said, okay, well, if we are so confident about it, why don't we go out there and do it? And that's what you do. And it didn't feel like a massive risk for me, at least. In hindsight, it certainly was. You never know if it's going to work out. But if you believe in what you're doing and kind of take that approach, are we solving a problem? If we are we smart enough to present the solution the right way? Then it's going to work out. So that's my view, like from financing and doing investment banking, going to buy side. So like whatever you do, it's kind of like that. Is there a problem? Can you fix it? Either by setting your own shop or joining some other shop. That's really what it all comes down to. It's a problem solving business at the end of the day.
If you had to think back to like what was the toughest transition, do you know what it was?
Yeah, no, 100% NLC. There were times where you questioning everything. Don't get me wrong, especially early on. It just, and we got lucky. Timing worked out for us. We had a great support from our investors. We'd done it, but there are times where you sit back, and that's the thing, right? Everything works out, and if you have a mindset that kind of brings you down, then that's bad. If you approach all those challenges, say, okay, how can this be solved? Because that is the fact. You cannot change the fact. You can solve everything that comes after that, which I think we were quite good at, and which helped get us to the level that we are and continue to go to.
Okay, nice. So let's sit there a little bit. This is a leadership podcast, and we've got a very smart and engaged audience, and some may be thinking about stepping out on their own or taking that entrepreneurship path. So from making the shift yourself and already being in it for a few years, what are your biggest learnings? What did you learn from making that shift to a founder?
Interesting. What are the biggest learning? I think in any job, but particularly as a founder, as you're setting up a culture, early on, you are the firm. And what I mean by that is the way you carry yourself, the way you do things, the way you approach problems, everything you do is going to define what the firm is going to be. And as you grow, which is something that we found very interesting, more often than not, if you grow organically by hiring one or two or three more people, not going like to 30 new people, people adapt to the culture that you set up. And that's really the culture about the founders and how I think that's the best learning. And then the second learning, we talked about this, is being mindful of how much you influence the other people, but how much those people influence yourself. So as you surround yourself with and build out the team, you really do need that diversity of thinking, diversity of approach. It's something that for us, it's very front of the mind. It's kind of what kind of backgrounds define what kind of thinking process. And then you certainly, even though you might not think you act that way, you will become essentially a merge of all of those things that you built, that you bring on the team itself, I guess. So it's a very relevant thing for us at the moment because we have had massive growth and it's continued to be that. But then fundamentally, we come from a banking background. None of us are equity investors. So what that means is typically you have downside first approach, and that's kind of putting these limitations on yourself. And you just need to let go of that and think of, okay, how do we do this and how we get to the right level?
My interpretation of that, I guess, is that you kind of led the culture, you build from the front, and you model the culture that you're looking for as the brand, as you put it, or as the firm, especially at the start. Yeah. Have you put in place any cultural items that you feel have helped build the environment that you're looking for from the team?
Do you know what it is? The thing coming from Investec being a very culture first type of firm where culture is very important and things come from the top. We actually spent a lot of time where we were just launching the firm and when it was just me and Slade defining what the culture is going to be, which sounds really silly when it's only two of you, but there are essentially values that we have. There's 7 of them that they do hold true to this day. We spent a lot of time defining them back then, and then you kind of feel like you forgot them, but you really don't. So those are the things that I think are quite defining of what NLC is. What's useful about having those values determined is whenever you're unsure about something, you can bring yourself to the values. How does this fit with our values? And then you run by through them. You can't have too many and say, okay, does this align with them or it doesn't? Because if it doesn't, then you just don't do it. And there are a number of decisions as an entrepreneur, as a founder, that you'll place yourself in where there's pros and cons and you can go both ways and you're a bit unsure of. But as long as they align with the core principles, core values that you set up when you set the business, when you had none of these problems or successes, that's kind of what sets you back to the true center.
Yeah, I've had quite a lot of experience that building cultures at Outram, and again the values and the part the values play. And one thing that we do, we have an internal recognition tool and portal that allows you to recognize things that have gone well,
Yeah,
but recognizing them within the areas of your core values. So it's constantly drawing back and reminding everybody involved about why we do what we do. I found that to be super powerful. So it's really interesting to hear your take on it and how you're using it as well.
that's very interesting. I think we haven't done anything like that, but I think we will based on what you just said. I think that's great because showing recognition through the values you have just, yeah, it validates both. It celebrates your successes, and that's great.
And are there different things you should do as an investment banker to prepare yourself for entrepreneurship? I know you've talked about skill set and the mindset, and they are key components, of course, but anything they should try to build in a different way or grow if they want to step out on their own?
Investment banking is a wide term. It can mean many different things. But if I start with a little bit of my background, which is more kind of lending, I think that you need to first do that mindset shift because you'll be always trained kind of what can get wrong, and you look at downside scenario and then you structure your loan to protect for that kind of worst case scenario. You don't really care what the potential upside is. I think in investment banking and M&A, people are a lot more focused to the upside, and that's great. I think that's certainly a big step towards that. And I would say that's probably the biggest shift that we had to do given our background. But in general, you need to ask yourself is there a problem out there that you can solve? And then how will you go about solving it? And if you believe in it and you think you're doing it, then I think you should give it a go. The worst thing is growing old and looking back at your life and wondering what if. At least that's one of the things that we use a lot when we recruited a number of these senior guys. Because when you go to them, it's like you sell them the story and they'll buy into it. I'm like, well, you don't want to be 10 years down the line and you see the success and you can wonder what if. That's a terrible place to be. Just give it a go. If it doesn't work out, you can always go back and do what you've been doing. Life is not binary. Things work out one way or another. That's my view. You find your
Agreed.
way.
No regrets. No
Exactly.
regrets, right?
Exactly.
It's funny because I ask leaders, and I'll ask you the same question later, so you got a little jump start now on your answer. But I always ask them to go back to their first day in the industry and give
Oh,
themselves some
jeez.
advice. And I hear again and again, don't stress, don't worry, don't
Exactly.
sweat the little things. This is like comes up again
Exactly.
and again. It's never more profound than that because that's what matters, right? I want to talk a little bit about mentorship because I
Mhm.
think it's key and I hear it a lot. So, how has mentorship played a role in your career?
Throughout my career, fantastic bosses is probably the way to describe it more than mentors. I never, due to the various different things, had mentors, but my managers were incredible people, all very different. And I was very lucky. I spent decent amount of time in all of my roles, but I have had multiple roles, starting with the big bank, and I had a manager there who was absolutely fantastic. I learned so much from that person, and the way how important it is to have the ability to articulate your ideas, to articulate your vision to the team. And I saw from him how much the way you behave as a leader has an impact on everyone around you to get them excited or potentially to put them in a little bit of a down mindset, which as you grow in your career, you can forget because we all focus within ourselves, but that's certainly the thing. And then moving to Investec and seeing how a smaller bank who's nimble and very entrepreneurial, how did they work? How do they think about things? And there were a number of managers that I had there that were absolutely incredible. I think the fact that we started raising institutional capital for fund finance product was purely a function of a vision or a strong vision from a leader of that fund finance team at the time that nobody was doing it. And his view was, why not? Everybody said it can be done. And he said, why not? Let's give it a try. And we gave it a try. It was very hard, but guess what? Here we are today. And then when I was doing sales, I had a different manager, and he was incredible with driving the most out of people, finding the mindset, finding the will within yourself. So for those reasons, I didn't feel like I needed a mentor because they were mentoring me throughout. But without that, none of our success would happen. I think people around you define that. And outside of even work, I had friends that were in different positions. I was able to extract from them all the career advice that I needed to create my own path. But without that, absolutely no chance of getting to the NLC. I mean, I told you at the beginning, like for me, there was starting my own business was never even an option. Like that, just I can't even say I dreamt of it because I didn't. it took a very long time and a lot of people shaping that you kind of go to, and it's like, you can actually do this. So I think that's huge for anybody listening. Find the right mentor, have multiple mentors, and go once you feel like you're done with one or you got the most out, go to the next one. It's super important, and learning from other people's experiences is the best you can hope for.
It's great that you've got that from the managers, the leaders around you, and didn't have to go searching for it. I don't think that's always the case. So that's a great story, and I'm glad it helped on your journey. And I'm sure you're playing that role for many now at NLC, which is great.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about networking. Again, important for everybody, right? And I guess as a founder, maybe even a little bit more important. Talk to me a bit about that. Your thoughts on networking, how you do it effectively.
I'm going to be very honest. I hated it, which is a strange thing coming from a sales guy. I really did it. I mean, it was so painful. It was so painful because you're caught up in your own head, how you come across, what you think. But as you shift your mentality and you go into, you want to connect with these people for the right reason and help yourself, then that everybody benefits from that interaction. I don't think I'm great at networking these days. I don't think that's what people would say when they see me, because I try a lot, but it takes a lot of effort for me to do that. And I think it comes down to that kind of, what's the worst thing that can happen. So yes, networking is incredibly important. You can't force it. It needs to be a little bit of a natural and something that you work on. But I think building your network from people, that's the easier part. Going to the conferences and making yourself known, that's the harder part. And I had to do that a number of times in my career, because I moved from kind of origination to fundraising, where you have to go and meet all of these new people. And it can be tricky, daunting, but that's where that perseverance comes from. You have ups and downs, and you just do it. And then before you know it, you look back and you feel like you know everyone, and that's just because you interacted with them in some way. The risk taking to put yourself in a situation where you might be rejected, or you might have a interaction that's not so pleasant. So that's what I mean when I mean like networking, which was hard. I think the keeping the network from people you work with and you admire, that's for me almost easy. Those becomes friends, and those are people that I want to spend time with. So I don't look at that as networking. I like to learn about what's going on in their lives, but more kind of professional networking, I think that can be tricky at times.
Getting yourself out your comfort zone and being willing to do it. And I think just getting it going, once that ball's rolling, it tends to roll a lot quicker, right, than the stress of getting it going. What about fund financing at conferences, events? Are there ones for those who have an interest listening that they should think about or go to?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of them. So there's this organization called Fund Finance Association, and kind of to give you how fund finance as a market is old but relatively new, because private capital grew so much in the last 10 years. I was lucky enough that I had an opportunity to attend, I think, third or fourth conference, and we're now to the 13th or 14th. So I saw the growth, and every year it would double, and now this global one is huge. It's really, really big. So it's great to see development of the market, but it's called Fund Finance Association. It's global one is in Miami, and there's one in London in June this year. Fantastic event for anybody that's interested in learning more about fund finance, and what they have been able to do for our market has been a great achievement, because it took a long time, and you've seen how it was very, very small. Like, to give you an indication, like one of the first ones were held in a boardroom of lawyers, and now there's a whole massive hotel in Miami with tens of thousands of people.
It's exciting to see the space grow so much for you. I feel the journey and your passion for it. That's great to see. We'll make sure we grab some links and drop those in the show notes for those that are interested, so you've got easy access there.
Sorry to just add, I should have mentioned that from the start. What the Fund Finance Association is very good at is they have a lot of universities where they teach people interested who are already in fund finance, interested about fund finance, about the space. So anybody in investment banking keen to learn, kind of touching on everything we touched on before, why we think it's important, I certainly think they should look it up.
That's cool. Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for that. I'll grab those and we'll drop them in. Always good about building the knowledge for those that are interested, for sure, as we've already talked about. So we'll put those links there. What's ahead? Coming towards the end of the episode. So what's ahead for the space, and what's ahead for NLC in the next 12 months or so?
A lot is probably the best answer. We had a very strong end of last year. So one thing that we didn't touch on, and why we often say that our timing was quite good, is we launched a platform where interest rates were low and all that, but then we went through massive stress in the market, which luckily for us, this is kind of going back to what you said, looking at every challenge in a positive and negative way. Luckily for us, it created more opportunities. It did create more challenges on the other hand, but it meant that the firm grew a lot faster than we expected that it would, and we just continue to build on that growth now. So these 12 months are really for us growing the team, growing the business, looking at new jurisdictions that we are hopefully going to open at some point in the second half this year, starting with US.
Wow.
Number of new things that we're doing on the fund side and funding of our platform side. So there's many exciting new initiatives that played into part. And for some people listening, they'll probably know the U.S. regional banks, SVB, First Republic, and Signature Banks. Those three were massive lenders in the fund finance space. It's not fund finance that influenced their ultimate demise. It was mismanagement of interest rate risk. But when you have three large lenders pulling back, absolutely disappearing, and all the other regional banks that were in space dropping back, when you have an alternative lender who can do large sizes like us, you tend to win by just association, and that has helped us. So this year is very exciting for us. There's a number of things to do. It's all about finding the time to do it, but that's why we're trying to grow and build a team even further.
Nice. Well, as I said at the start, exciting times ahead, and I can feel that. And good luck with the growth into the US and the international markets. I know that's a challenge, but will be a fun one, I'm sure. And it's interesting to hear your take on the collapse of SVB and First Republic Bank and Signature. It was such a big and hot topic last year, but to see that out of that challenge, there are positives and growth as well for you and for the market is exciting. So I did promise earlier that towards the end, I'd ask you if you could look back on your career and go back to that first day or first week or so in the industry. What's the one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
So as you said that question, I was subconscious thinking about. I was so determined, and just like I would just tell myself, just relax, just like take a step back. It was like I was trying to figure out my whole life in the first 18 months of these Lloyd's rotations, and in hindsight, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Life has this way of kind of throwing things ahead of you, and you have a choice to make. But as long as you do the right things based on your internal instincts and your gut feel, which is coming down to your values, which we discuss, you'll be fine. Like genuinely be fine. Like focus on things you can control, work hard, try to learn as much as possible. I think one thing that we didn't touch on, and something that thinking about this podcast and potential audience that you have, I think is very important, is one of the challenges that we see when we are looking to recruit young people is they sometimes coming from a larger institutions, they have a lot of processes that they're very good at executing those processes, but often they don't go step further in trying to understand it. So you can ask them a question, they can answer you the question really well, but then you ask a question, well, why? And very quickly it starts to disseminate and then never. So I would also tell that to myself. I think I was good at it, but just kind of don't, if you have a process that irritates you, try to understand why is that in place, what are the good and bad things about it, and then kind of why, how would you think about it if you were in a management position? Would you implement the same thing? How can you improve it? Doing it in that way is definitely going to guarantee you more success, and it will allow you to understand the whole thing. And we here talk about investment banking, fund finance, how it all interrelates. Our finance world, the world in general, is all connected. If you think that your industry is isolated, you're a bit naive. It all works together. And as you start to ask these simple questions, you will get a much better picture. People might not be able to answer you those things, which kind of reflects that they haven't done that journey. But I think that's so important when you do things like why are we doing this, and in the nicest possible way, trying to get to the bottom of it. And then everything will start to fall together.
Love that. What a great piece of advice. And it's advice I do hear it again from other leaders as well about understanding the why behind what you're doing. And it's also much more motivational. And once you know what part your work is playing, right, in the bigger picture, that can be massive for engagement as well. So love that. Thanks for the advice. In my opinion, successful leaders are often readers. And again, this could be other materials nowadays outside of books, given what we have access to. So are there any things that podcasts, reading, certain things that you do or have done that you recommend to our audience to help them grow and develop as a leader?
Yes, I think for me, there were a number of books that had a profound impact. And private equity, private capital, like Stephen Schwarzman book about what it takes and how he built Blackstone is probably maybe because at the time that I was reading it, which was at the time when I was contemplating and very close to launching NLC, had a massive, massive influence on me because I could have related to some of the things about his story, and then that allowed me to visualize some of my own success. I personally enjoy those biographies or autobiographies from leaders, not only in finance industry, but world leaders. There's so much you can learn about it. So those are the things that I like to watch. And then same thing about documentaries, about people's successes. I do feel that sometimes the society doesn't necessarily do justice celebrating some of the leaders, and they often tend to focus on the negative things, and you can easily get caught into that. But it's not easy to achieve big things, and people that have, there's a lot that we can learn from them, and I think that's what I enjoy. So in addition to breeding, there's a lot of great documentaries out there about some of the people and how things have been built out, and that I would certainly recommend.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Okay, so we've come to the end of the episode. It's flown by, as always. I've really enjoyed the chat. I mean, is there
This is
anything
great, yeah.
I haven't asked you that you want to share with the audience?
No, I don't think so. I think I had a lot of fun, and hopefully people find this useful. I am always, anybody who is interested in fund finance, who's maybe coming from fund finance or any other background, please feel free to reach out to us. NLC, you can find us LinkedIn, our website. You will have our contact details. We like to think that we're quite approachable. If you're interested in a space, if you're interested in learning more, doing anything about it, please, we are more than happy to speak and provide a little bit of our insight. And then we also are constantly growing our team. So if there are people out there looking for that new chapter and potentially interested in fund finance and NLC, we'd love to have a chat. But aside of that, no, I think I really enjoyed this. This was great. It was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. I think we touched a lot of interesting topics.
I like that. Well, thanks again, Neno. What we'll include a link to your LinkedIn, obviously, profile, and the link to NLC and all the show notes as well. So those who are interested and like what you're doing in terms of the business you're building, the culture, the team, the growth, then you should definitely reach out.
Yeah, thanks. And don't want to take away. I think one thing we didn't talk about, which is one thing you mentioned, and you've been very kind, giving us a lot of recognition. I think celebrating successes, and this might feel that we planned this, but we didn't. And that's probably one thing that I'm not good at. And that's how we connected, obviously. But take a step back, recognize what you achieve, what your partner, anybody that your friends, your family, celebrate little things. That has a lot of influence. And I think you guys have been incredible, both to help us with our clients, but help us internally to do that. So thank you very much for that. And I promise this wasn't staged. It was just as you were giving me all the power, I'm like, yeah, we should probably recognize some of the things. So you certainly helped us on that front, and thank you very much for that. And thank you for having us on. It's been a great fun.
I appreciate that, the nod. And again, celebrating success is what we do, and it's so important. Don't always move on to the next thing before you give the right amount of time to celebrate the wins that you have. So we're glad to help you with some great deal toys on that front, as always.
It's not a closing dinner. Closing dinner is one thing. Showing that appreciation to someone, I think that's what, for me, celebrating successes means, and it's so important.
Cheers, Neno. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Pete, very much.
This episode of the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast was brought to you by Outram, the global leaders in the financial deal gift, awards, and recognition space. So if you need any assistance, don't be afraid to hit me up or the Outram team. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thanks for joining us. And until next time, best of luck on your growth journey.